Welcome to Noel Anderson's 15 Minutes of Fame. In today's episode, we are off to the theatre. So let's dim the lights, raise the curtain and begin. There's a line in the glass menagerie that lands like a quiet punch. I didn't go to the moon, I went much further, for time is the longest distance between two places. If you know the play, you already feel what playwright Tennessee Williams is doing there. He's not talking about rockets or adventure. He's talking about memory, regret, and the way the past keeps moving even when you've changed cities, changed jobs, changed lovers. Tonight, I want to take you inside Melbourne Theatre Company's staging of this American classic, and talk about why it still glitters brightly, why it still touches us, and what this Australian production does differently. Before we get to the specifics of the staging, it's worth remembering what the Glass Menagerie actually is. It's not just a family drama, but Williams is rewriting his own life. And boy does he have family issues. When it premiered in 1944, it introduced the Wingfields, and they're drawn so closely from Williams's own mother and sister that you can almost see the seams where truth becomes theatre. This memory play has that slippery feeling, part confession, part invention, part self-protection. The story sits in late 1930s St. Louis, in a small apartment that feels too tight for the emotions inside it. Tom Wingfield is our narrator, looking back, guiding us through what he remembers. He lives with his mother, Amanda, who clings fiercely to a memory of gentility and social ease that no longer exists. And then there's Laura, Tom's disabled sister, someone who doesn't push herself forward into the world so much as step backward from it. Her refuge is her collection of delicate glass animals, tiny figurines that feel safer to hold than people. The engine of the plot is simple. Amanda is fixated on the idea of a gentleman caller, a suitor who might save Laura from loneliness and maybe save the whole family from its sense of slow suffocation. And when the gentleman caller finally arrives, the apartment fills with possibility for a very brief moment. You can feel the family grasping at it. But the Glass Menagerie isn't built for easy rescue. Hope flares up, and then it dies quickly. And Tom, cornered by responsibility, guilt, and his hunger to escape, eventually does what the play has been warning us he will do. He runs away never to return. But leaving the apartment isn't the same as leaving the memory, especially not the memory of Laura, which comes back repeatedly to haunt him. Now, this Melbourne Theatre Company production for 2026 gives the play a sharper, more contemporary bite, and it leans into something that's always been in the DNA of this piece, its queerness. It adds what I'd call a queer-erotic glow around the character of Tom in particular, a thinly disguised Williams. It gives the production a modern edge and a queer perspective. That makes the first act feel fresh, confident, and purposely shaped. The world created by director Mark Wilson is stylized, heightened, making you aware that you're watching remembered life, not objective reality. But that consistency doesn't hold all the way through. In the second act, the production wobbles a little, most of all in the famous scene between Laura and the gentleman caller. That moment drifts closer to naturalism, and because the first act has trained us to live inside a more stylized memorscape, the shift can feel slightly awkward. It's not that the scene fails, it's that it sits oddly against the theatrical language and moments of queerness the production has already established. If you've ever watched a show change rules halfway through, you'll know the sensation. You are still engaged, but you are also recalibrating. The strongest and most distinctive choice here is how openly the direction embraces the queer subtext around Tom, who, let's be honest, is a thinly veiled self-portrait of Tennessee Williams. In this interpretation, Tom reads as closeted and torn up inside, pulled between duty at home and desire elsewhere, between a life he's expected to live and a life he can barely admit he wants. That tension has always been present in the text, but here it's pushed forward and made visible. Tim Draxel takes on Tom, and while he's older than the character is typically played, he brings a kind of authority that works in this memory framework. Since Tom is narrating from a distance, from after, that maturity can actually deepen the sense that we are hearing a man revisit the defining wound of his life. Draxel's stage presence is strong and immediately watchable, and there's a striking early entrance that deliberately nods to a certain cinematic homoeroticism, an image that signals, right away, that this Tom's inner life isn't going to be treated as incidental. More than anything, Draxel carries the story with confidence. You feel his charisma, and you also feel the ache underneath it. As Amanda, Alison White delivers a performance built on incredibly precise observation. Amanda can easily become a caricature, the nagging mother, the faded belle, the comic villain. But White finds the little pressure points, the small irritations, the emotional manipulations that come from fear more than cruelty. She dominates the stage in the way Amanda should. And here's the thing about Amanda, you don't necessarily have to like her to be invested. This performance understands that. You can recognize the damage she does while still seeing the panic that drives her. And yes, there's a moment worth mentioning just for the theater pleasure of it, Amanda's outfit choice when she prepares to greet the gentleman caller in Act 2. It's the kind of detail that tells you the costume design is not just decorative, it's character, it's comedy, it's longing. It's Amanda trying to conjure a version of herself that the world no longer confirms. Laura is played by Millie Donaldson in her professional debut, and her approach to the role is shaped by her lived experience as a disabled and neurodivergent artist. Laura is notoriously hard to play on stage because she doesn't drive action conventionally. She exists in pauses, in hesitations, in the fragile space between wanting and retreating. Donaldson makes that stillness compelling rather than empty. She doesn't force Laura into a louder version of herself for the audience's convenience. And that restraint pays off, because it invites you to lean in. You find yourself rooting for her, wanting something real to reach her, even while you sense this is not a play that hands out uncomplicated happy endings. Harry McGee completes the central quartet as the gentleman caller, and he brings an essential groundedness to the role. In some productions, the gentleman caller can feel like a plot device. Here, he feels like a real person. He's warm, sincere, and recognizably from the outside world, the world that keeps moving while the Wingfields are stuck in their loop of memory and need. Harry and Laura's candlelit scene together becomes the emotional hinge of the production. It's staged in a way that lets the audience simply watch, without the usual sense of theatrical rushing or pushing toward a punchline. That quiet is important because it allows the encounter to become what it should be, not a grand romance, not a cruel joke, but a moment in which Laura is, briefly, truly seen. And for Laura, being seen and being heard is almost revolutionary. The scene serves as a turning point, not because it fixes her life, but because it reveals what she's been denied. So, does this staging become the definitive staging of the Glass Menagerie? No, it isn't, and it doesn't pretend to be. Some choices feel perfectly tuned in Act 1 and slightly less integrated in Act 2. But the direction is thoughtful, sometimes knowingly camp, and anchored by performances that keep the play's emotional logic intact even when the style shifts around it. Design-wise, the costumes are an ongoing delight, and the set supports the interpretation rather than just illustrating the apartment. And above all, it's a pleasure to hear Williams's language spoken on stage again, because his writing has a musicality that can't be replaced. Even if you know the story, even if you know where it's going, the phrasing still catches you off guard. The play still sparkles and is still captivating. What this production offers, specifically, is a Glass Menagerie willing to tilt toward a queer sensibility. For some theatergoers, that will feel like the most honest way to stage Williams now, because it foregrounds what was once coded. For others, it may feel like an overlay. But if that's your flavor of Williams, if you like your classics interpreted with clarity and a little heat, this one delivers more often than it misses. It's easy to forget, with plays that have become classics, that they earned that status by being alive on stage, not by being respectable on paper. The Glass Menagerie was Williams's first breakthrough, winning the New York Drama Critics Circle Award in 1945, and more than 80 years later, it's still doing its job, asking us what we owe our families, what we owe ourselves, and whether escape ever truly works when memory keeps following you. If you love good theater and you want to see a production that takes Tennessee Williams seriously while still letting the piece breathe in a contemporary atmosphere, this is one I'd gladly recommend. The interpretation may not be for everyone. The queer angle may unsettle those who see the world through a heterosexual lens. But the human truths of family, memory, the fragile weight of the past, glisten like small glass figurines catching candlelight. If you enjoyed this podcast on the Glass Menagerie, remember to subscribe and share. This review was written by Noel Anderson. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.